Hello, my friends. In this video, I'm going to walk you through a tutorial that I have created for my students related to using Lambda. Now, in another lab/tutorial, I show how to use Lambda to work with essentially web pages, and that's in a synchronous fashion where basically you make a request to a function that's going to return something and it immediately sends it back to the browser. But a lot of things in the world that we do in companies don't work that way. Some things are more like batches. So imagine that you're at a restaurant. You don't know, you don't stand there at the counter waiting for your food to come back to you when you order it. Sometimes you grab a number and you go sit down. So that would be asynchronous processing of jobs. And a lot of things that we do in companies are asynchronous jobs. And so I'm going to use Lambda functions together with something called SQS, Simple Queuing Service, to demonstrate how asynchronous jobs could work. So here we go. And first, I got to try and move a bunch of things out of the way. Let's see if I can move this one. Nope, that will not let me move it onto another screen. Really annoying. All right, good enough. Okay, so at the beginning of this set of instructions that will also be included in a link down below, it says we're like my example was given. Asynchronous tasks are like at being at a restaurant. Um, I give another example of a batch process for work tasks, like when you have to scan millions of records. That's another thing that you might need to do. Like, so if you had images, for example, that you needed to scan, and you don't need to just sit there while you spend days or weeks or months going through a whole bunch of image processing. But you want to know if anything fails. All right, so we're going to learn Lambda and we're going to learn SQS. All right, and so the context for this particular problem is that our fictional company, Paradise Donut Company, has millions of social media messages that they're going to put into a queue for analysis. So they don't want to lose any of them. And you could, again, change this into a lot of different contexts. It could be sensor readings coming in from devices that you have on your networks, et cetera, just whatever your imagination can take you to. But you want to make sure that every single record that you've received, that you keep track of it and you know whether you've processed it or not. And so a queue can help us do that. And so here's a diagram of what we're going to be building. There are going to be a bunch of social media type messages, and they're going to be added to a queue. Each message is going to be evaluated with a Lambda function, and then a report. It could go a lot of different places. In this case, we'll just push it out there to CloudWatch, which is AWS's logging service, and that's something really good to get familiar with. Now, as part of the analysis, it's going to evaluate whether the messages that are being posted in social media related to donuts are positive, negative, or neutral or non-applicable. All right, so first thing it says to do is go to the Lambda console in the web console, and we're going to name a function evaluate message. We'll take the default node, and let's see, we have execution role stuff, create a new role, and that's about it. Okay, so we come under here and we look for Lambda. We're going to, I'm going to make sure I don't have any of the others sitting there. And we're going to author it from scratch, call it evaluate. Don't, I figure I'm going to use camel case, donut message, and I'm going to create a new role. This is probably so that it can commute, so that the function can create or can talk to CloudWatch, which usually it has to do. Let's see if there's anything else in there. So evaluate donut message, looking good, create function. We're good to go. It's going to look like that. All right, so here we go. Create function. Now, there's a lot of different ways you could create functions. This is with the console. You can also do it programmatically. You could write software code that issues SDK or API calls. You can install the AWS console um, application, and you can just type in the terminal window and write commands that create functions for you. Um, so there's a lot of different ways that you can create a function with any given name in your service. And ooh, look at that. SQS. How could that? Sorry, I'm going to pause for a second here. I am going to let me just do this twice because that surprises me that that's already there. I wonder if it's got some legacy stuff in there from me doing it previously. All right, so just for giggles, I'll say evaluate donut test and do that a second time because I don't think SQS is normally there. So that's weird that AWS is just remembering random things that I've done in the past. Oh yeah, huh. So yeah, it should not have done that. Interesting. Well, you keep your function as evaluate donut message, and I will keep mine as evaluate donut test because I want it to look like it's been done from scratch. Interesting. Maybe I've got something. All right, this is going to break from what is supposed to be in this tutorial, but in order for it to be hooked up like that, I wonder if SQS is still running in my account. So do I have any queues? No, there's literally nothing there. It's kind of annoying when companies aren't perfect. But then again, we're not perfect either, are we? All right, so weirdly, I will go with this because that thing that was added doesn't exist yet. Because I did it more than once, it's got some, so it should look like this. All right. On the bottom portion of the page, we can configure our function across lots of categories. We've got a code tab where you can write code. And you may have noticed when you created the function that there was a drop down for picking one of many different languages and then also different versions of different languages. If you have different versions of different languages, it requires sometimes different syntax for writing functions. The handler function is you can actually have a lot of other files that you can add in over here and have your function call it. But if you've done other programming languages, the main method, the thing that gets called and then is the last place that exits when you run your Lambda functions is this handler function. So you can reference, half the planet's worth of other software code in here if you want, but this is the entry point and this is the exit point. So sometimes I'll have a bunch of other things up top, libraries I'm referencing, etc. We'll get to that. Um, all right, what else we have here? There's the function, hello from Lambda. There's a to-do section where you're recommended to fill some things out. There's a test tab, a monitor tab. So when your function's running, you can see its performance, how fast it runs, if it's having failures, things related to configuration. We can talk about aliases later, versions as well, aliases, back on aliases. Okay, there's the code tab. We've got a test tab, and let's create an event. We'll call it test event. And okay, so it's a good thing because we have like 52 pages in this tutorial, so we want to go through it quickly. Um, so I'm clicking on the test tab there, and I believe I want to create a new test called test event. And the reason why I do this when learning about Lambda functions is that, well, let's see if it'll. But right here, it's expected that whenever you trigger a function, that you're passing in really just one object, one variable to the function, and it can be empty. Uh, and we can simulate that right here by writing basically test events. So test event, and I think I'm going to make it empty if I recall correctly. We shall see in a minute. No, actually, this one didn't say do anything. How fast it runs, test event. All right, still got some stuff in there. Let's configure a test event to send a custom object. All right. All right, so Close enough. I'm just going to say save and I'm going to say test. And it ran my function and it says that this is what was returned from the function. So there's a return line in that handler function. And so this is all the information, and it's a JSON object, and you can read the property called body. This is where we usually set things that we care about. There was already some default stuff there. And then we can see how long it takes for the function to run. And let's go ahead and run it again. And we see that it ran in 2 milliseconds. So usually it runs a little bit slower. So it usually tells you the startup time and then how fast it took to run. It takes a little bit longer the first time you run it than subsequent ones. And the reason for that is because it's actually creating a container in the background in the AWS infrastructure, and it'll leave that thing up and running for 10 or 15 minutes. And if it doesn't get called again, then it will close down that container. But if you're running it relatively quickly, then there's a live piece of software ready to run your function that's up and going. All right. You can also see how much memory was used by your function. So if you need more memory to do the processing that's involved with what you're doing, you can use that if you want. You can also, I would assume you're going to pay more for that as well at some point. All right. And we sent in nothing into our right here. And technically we could do, if we have name value pairs that are listed in here, we can read that. Oops, I just lost everything. Evaluate doing it test. Um, Technically, we can read as part of the event object, we can read the properties that are part of it anywhere that we want in here. And we haven't done that yet. But this object that gets created is what's returned, and that is what was displayed when we viewed things. So right now we're saying, hey, test event, if we run that, um, that response variable is what's returned right here. And as a side note, it says that this is being saved into CloudWatch. So we're temporarily seeing it here, but it's permanently being saved somewhere else. All right, now we're talking about potentially customizing it. We did our empty event, we ran it close enough. We could have hello world, don't really care too much. Let's we can click the test button if we go down here and run our event that way. So that's also good. So let's just kind of demonstrate that. Once you've created a test and given it a name, then over here on this tab, you can come down here and you can run test event. And then the same information that's displayed on the other tab will show up here, the output of the variable, as well as the information that gets saved over to your logging service. All right, so you have some things to record. If you're doing this for my class, we can view this information in CloudWatch logs. Let's go ahead and check that out. So we come over here and let's see, there's a couple different ways we could do it. Hopefully this will make it easier. I click test over here and I can click on this link to go to CloudWatch logs. I could have also just gone in here and typed in CloudWatch and that would get me to the same place. Let me just show you what I mean. So I come in here and I'm looking for log groups, and let's see, if I type in donut, uh, we are going to see this thing called a log group. And so it's named after our function. And in here, they call them log streams. And if I click on that, in here is the same information I'm seeing in that other window. So if I click through enough times, anyway, it's showing the stuff that you saw at the bottom of the page right there. It's not going to record this information unless you add a statement that does that. Now, I also had um, clicked right there to get quick access to this rather than going through the click path. So this took me to the same place. I can click on one of the log streams and I can see all of the output that it's creating. So if things are running while you're not looking at it, let's just say 1,000 people come and visit your function for some reason and you think things are failing, then you could come into here to look at the logging of what might have happened. All right, let's look at the next thing. Update your Lambda function to log some events. Sweet. Okay, so getting into the functionality, we might have messages come in from our social media messages that say, I tried the new Christmas bar, it was delicious, a donut. I tried it, it was gross, and then something, I grabbed some donuts, I was the life of the party. That says nothing about the Christmas bar. And so that's kind of like a non-applicable. So we want to categorize messages coming in about donuts that are going to be coming into our function as positive, negative, or non-applicable. So we want to create a test event called positive Christmas donut message. All right, so let me explain what we're doing here. Someday we're going to be sending messages in here. Now, if we look at this visually, someday we're going to have a trigger. We're going to have something, a service, could be the web, can be SQS, sending in messages to the event property right there, parameter. Um, but before we have live services doing that, let's simulate what they're going to be sending. So in order to do that, that's what we use testing for, is we're going to create an event. We're going to call it a positive message. So we're going to simulate receiving a positive message, and then we're going to create what we believe a service in AWS is going to create as a JSON message. So we come over here, and this is the message that we need to create. Bada boom. All right, we want to save it and test it, and it's not really going to do anything interesting at this point because we haven't evaluated the message, but we can verify that it's going to work. So first we save it with that message, and we can either test it here, or we can come back over to here, and here's our list of um, of tests that we can run. And if I run it, then yes, we see how long it took to run. And we see that the test event that was run, meaning it passed in the JSON object from that test, was passed in. But the response here is still this, because we didn't process anything that came in. So let's start working our magic here. All right, so we come in and here's a block of code that says, let's copy over everything else that was there. And we're going to console.log a unique message ID. So from event, we'll look at that JSON object and do event.unique message ID, and we'll do event.special donut name. We will console.log that out. And then in the body, instead of, well, I guess we'll leave it as hello from Lambda for now. So that's fine. We'll just send it to the console, which means actually send it over to CloudWatch. So we copy that, come over here. I'm going to paste over all of that. And just as kind of a sanity check, I'm going to go over here to test. I want to look at, let's see, oops. I want to look at my previous one. Notice that there is a property called special donut name and message text and unique message ID. That is what I'm accessing right here. So each of those properties I could access through this variable object right there using dot notation. And this is just extra text I'm adding in. Okay, now before I can run this, technically it's being saved in a browser. It's not actually, this code is not in a running container at this time, ready to be processed. So I have to click deploy. and it says it is basically updating it. And then I need to run this again. So I will again run this test, so sending in a special message and printing out stuff. And then we should see right here in the response what happens. There we go. So we ran this test event. It's it says hello from Lambda still. But this is the information through console.log that's being saved to CloudWatch. And so it says it has an info statement there. And it's exactly what we have right there. And we can see it's reading from our test message. Nice. And just out of curiosity, if you recall, test event is empty. There's nothing in there. So what happens if we run that one? So if we run that one, we've got undefined because the empty curly braces in that other event doesn't have this property defined, so it just says undefined, but this print statement's real, so it can print out that portion. Okay, cool. Let's carry on. So we deployed, we ran it, we saw good stuff. We can go over to CloudWatch and click on the log streams to see things are recorded in there. Let's add additional messages then. So negative Christmas message will be our next event. So we come over here to test, create a new event, negative message, and it actually left our positive message there. So we're going to write over that. And there it goes. I will save that. I don't know if I'm going to run it just yet. I need an NA message, like non-applicable, meaning it's not evaluating a particular donut. Copy, paste. And here is a more ambiguous message. And I hit save. Cool, cool, cool. I could test all of my events if I want to. So let's go ahead and do that. So notice from what we copy and pasted in that I have like different, well, this one has no specialty donut name. Let's look at some of the others. And this negative one is talking about the Christmas donut. And also notice that each one of these on purpose has a different message ID. So I can have another way of distinguishing the events that I'm passing in while I'm testing. So I go over here to code, and I haven't changed anything code-wise over there, but I have new test events. So I try negative, and it says that negative was run, and this is the ID that I read from it. And this is the NA message, and I run that one, and it says that that is the one that was run. And we can see that no specialty donut name was passed in, but there was a message ID associated with it. Okay, so we have verified without doing any programming per se or any logic that we're passing in events successfully. And this is just to emulate what the kinds of things that will be coming in. All right, so if you're doing development and you're testing things coming in from API Gateway or other sources, then you will practice taking a block of JSON and putting it into a test event, and then you will write the code that processes that. So you start with something known, what it's supposed to look like, rather than you start sending in real things. So you need that for the testing process. All right, so now we want to modify our message to classify things. All right, so let's look at the code here. We're just going to do something very simple. We're going to look at the message that was passed in, which is event.message text. So it's one of the three properties that's being passed in as part of event. And we're just going to do some simple matching in that text to see, does it have any of these words in it, or does it have any of these words in it? If it has these words in it, then it's a positive message. If it has any of these words in it, then it's a negative message. And so I used a little function that I looked up for JavaScript Node that just says basically check whether it includes a word from the list. So it's anyway. So first it looks through the positive word list, and then it looks through the negative word list, and it classifies the sentiment as positive or negative. And then at the end, so we console.log whatever we find, and then we're going to send to our body statement what the classification was. It's basically going to look at the message and do one of three things with it. So let us grab our block of code, copy, paste. Okay, so it's there. It's saved permanently as soon as we put it there, but it's not actually runnable until we click deploy. And let's go ahead and test and see if the body message changes. So we go to positive message. And if you recall, there is something nice in there, something like it was delicious or it was good. We go to negative message. And we send in a negative message and it parses it and says, oh, I found a negative comment in there. And then we have a more generic message coming in that doesn't talk about a donut and it returns NA. So positive, negative, or NA gets passed in there or gets returned based on whatever we passed in with event.message text. Sweet. Okay, carrying on. We deployed, we ran all three events, we saw the outcome, and continuing on. All right. So now that we've kind of stubbed this out, now let's try and add in a real service that would provide things to it. So there's kind of two purposes to this. One is to potentially introduce you to SQS, a very important service, but then also secondarily to just show you how you swap out a fake test event with real things coming from real services. So we're going to go to SQS, something that will reliably store a whole bunch of pieces of information. In this case, we're going to pretend like maybe millions of social media messages are being stacked up in here and they're being reliably saved, and we're waiting to process them through our Lambda functions as fast as we can. So we're going to create a queue called social messages queue. So, and I'll use capital title case there, social messages queue, and then we're going to add a message to it. All right, so step one, we come in, we type SQS, and we create a queue, and we will call it social messages queue. And I don't think we need to do anything else. Cool. So I click create, it is created. And so it acts sort of like a database, but it's optimized for just, anyway, one type of record, a queue message. And it's also optimized for checking the message and then deleting the message. So it's basically add, read, delete, add, read, delete. Okay, so let us then go to send and receive messages. Well, in order to do that, we have to add messages to it. All right, so we click on send and receive messages, and this is a place where we can enter in a message that's going to be added to the queue. Okay, so here is a message that I will add to the queue. So it's got the same properties that we had in our fake test events. It's got a donut name, a message, and some text. And we have noted here that this is from SQS, and it's a positive message. So we're going to put it in there and then click send. So I paste it in, I click send, and it's not showing that anything is in the queue yet. So if I click pull for messages, it updated it. And now this message that I created has been added to the queue. So it's sitting in there with this unique ID. Presumably, if we did this 10,000 times with 10,000 different messages, we would have 10,000 different messages sitting in here as a big work task for us to work on. Okay, so it's in there. Click pull for messages. There it is. We can click on the ID and verify that stuff is in there. All right, let's just do that real quick. We will click on this message and we can verify that our message has been added with this ID. Great. Okay, now we need to worry about how do we make a queue that gets read automatically by this function. And there's probably different ways that we can do this, but think about it from a high level. If there's something that's sitting there in a queue, how often do you want to pull things from the queue? How many messages at a time do you want to pull from the queue? We'll address that in just a second, but there are different options. I think what we would like to do is if something gets added to the queue, we would probably like to tell the Lambda function, hey, go read from it. Another option is something like, hey, test every 10 seconds to see if something's in there. So you could either be kind of like a formal trigger of the function, or you could poll and just poll on some regular interval. So interesting dilemmas if you're the architect of the software solution. So we click on add trigger. So what's going to trigger our Lambda function, not a test event when it's running live. And we're going to say, let's pick one of the services, SQS social message queue, batch size 1. We will click add. An error message is going to occur. All right, we shall see. All right, so add. So we're saying that SQS, and there's lots of different services that can send information to Lambda functions, and they're all going to basically produce an event object that can be read by a function, and they will always look different. So I'm going to select this social message queue specifically from the overall SQS service. I want to send one message at a time. So what this is saying is that I could, as part of my Lambda function, send from SQS an array of messages, but I just want one message at a time being sent over. And that should be it. And I will click add. And it does say there is a error message. The function execution role does not have permissions to receive message on SQS. All right, so let's read about how we fix that. So I'm going to open a new browser, go to the console, and under configuration, there is a role that allows the Lambda function to talk to different things. And let's go ahead and find that. So I'm going to come over here, find Lambda again. And there's my donut thing. There's still nothing attached to it because I haven't finished setting it up yet, but I come under configuration and I come under, what was that? What was that? Hold on. Where is that at? No, that's not it. Huh. I was just, all right, I can't remember. All right, so I guess I'll have to look at configuration permissions. Oh, there we go. Okay, we go to permissions and let's see, where are we going to find this? Oh, so it says that there is, if you look under the IAM, identity and access management, there's going to be basically a set of permissions called this that are associated with this function. And right now, here's a summary visually, which makes sense. Pretty much whenever you create something, it's going to be able to talk to CloudWatch by default. And they created this for you when we created the function. But we also want to be able to interact with this other service SQS. So I'm going to click on that, I believe is where we're going with this. And here's a permission that's currently set, and we need to add to it. So I clicked on it. I'm over here. There it is. And I'm saying I want to add another policy. And we want to do AWS Lambda SQS base execution role. So I come over here and I'm updating this. I want to add a permission, attach a policy, SQS Lambda, add. Okay, so now there are two different things that are associated with this permission that is associated with the Lambda function. My Lambda function can now interact with AWS. It's allowed to, kind of like you can't date my daughter, but now you can. And you can also, so you can talk to SQS and you can talk to Lambda. All right, that is attached. So now we're going to return to the other web page, and we're going to try and add our connection. So back over here on my first tab, I had tried to add something before, and I said, hey, let Lambda be triggered by SQS, and it said at the bottom, you don't have permissions for that. Now I just created a permission that's already associated, that the named permission is already associated with this Lambda function. I just updated it in another tab. Now I click add, and it doesn't complain. Instead, I get the nice green success message. Yeehaw. All right, so I should be good to go now. So SQS should be able to send messages to my function. Alrighty, moments later, if you look under configuration triggers, you see that SQS has triggered from creating to enabled. All right, so where's triggers at? I can't remember. You just see, oh, there it is. So under configuration triggers, oh, it says it's in the state of creating. So it's not done, and then you refresh, and then it is done. Now we are ready to use it. All right, so let's go over to SQS again, and we have send receive messages. Oh yeah, so remember how there was that message that was sitting in there before? Let's go over to SQS again. So I'm going to type in SQS, and here's our queue, and here's send and receive messages. Remember a couple minutes ago that there was something there with a unique ID and it's gone. Where did it go? Well, we've enabled this so that these two can communicate. So presumably, the thing that was in there has gone down the water slide and it has passed through here. And if you've been following along, you know that whenever this runs, it creates a message in CloudWatch to say that it did run. So let's go check that out. So we are going to go under monitor, find the log group, click on the stream, and we're going to look through and find some stuff. And we were hoping that we did things right, but there's going to be an error message. But this is good because we need to learn how to debug. And that's also what CloudWatch is for. So we go to monitor, and we can click on view CloudWatch logs. And here is our log groups. And here is the one that I've been working on. Here's our log stream. And I click on the most recent one. And let's see what we've got. I can't remember if it's top to bottom or bottom to top. Oh, that's annoying. But somewhere in here is going to be an error. Let's see. Oh, sorry. This is going to take me a minute. Okay. Oh, I do see it says error here. So maybe they're all the same. I think it was probably repeating, trying what it was going to do. So one of the invocations that happened is it says, I cannot read something. I'm having a problem reading. So there's an error of some type that's occurring. Cannot read properties of undefined. Like, what does that mean? And then here we have specialty donut name undefined. Okay, so we've got some errors coming on through, and I have some messages here. So, okay, let's just read through this because it's been several weeks since I went through this and read it carefully. At a glance, you see an error message about something that's undefined. In fact, if you look in the summaries above, the message ID and specialty donut name are not being read in the Lambda function properly. So it's there, but can't read it. Um, this suggests that the way we wrote the test messages in JSON is not the same as the JSON coming in from the SQS. Ooh, so you probably trusted me and assumed that what I put in the event messages was the same as what comes from SQS, but we don't know that. So we need to check our assumptions. So let's debug and see what we're getting compared to what we thought we were getting. Okay, so temporarily, we're going to replace our whole function with debugging, and we're just going to use the event that came in from SQS, print it out to CloudWatch for review, and then have another message that says just debugging. All right, so and we'll put it back later, but this will help us figure out what an SQS JSON message looks like. So I come into here and I go to code and I replace all of my code and I deploy the change. And then to trigger it, I want to go back to SQS and I want to enter in a message. So let's go find ourselves a message. Here's one of our delicious messages. I click send and I click poll. And just kind of waiting to see. I don't know why it's taking a while this time. We see a little progress bar there. So we'll just wait patiently. In the awkward silence, I'm remembering that I forgot to bring my lunch today. I'm already hungry. Um, and since I'm working on a donut company, I'm thinking about donuts. All right, so I pulled for messages. I'm going to do it a second time. There's nothing there. So I'm going to presume that the send message that I did went right through the queue, or it was there temporarily, but it got read by my message. And the thing about queues is that it removes them from the queue when you, well, at least the way that we're using it. So it's been read successfully and it is gone. So if that's the case, then we should be able to come over here to monitor, look at CloudWatch logs again, go to my log stream and look at something that based on the line there that looks like a message. Okay, so this is the content. So it says info, remember? So remember if you do console.log, so we come over to here. If you do console.log on an event, this is a JSON object, and it comes out with info into CloudWatch logs. So what we're looking at here after info is this is what was passed in. All right, so let's look at this real carefully. It looks like there's a variable name passed in called records, and it is an array, and it has one single item in it. And in it, it has a message ID, a receipt handle. We haven't seen this before. It has a body, and then in the body, it has three attributes. and then we go back up again to other properties. Okay, so what happened when we were testing is we just had one object with these things in it, and as we look at an actual event being sent from SQS, it has an array that it sends in, and it has a whole bunch of properties, and as part of an element in the array, it has a property called body. And so basically an array element 0, there is a property called body, and in body is a JSON object with a property that has the stuff in it. So we have what we want in there. It's just nested a little bit compared to what we guessed would be in there. So now that we've seen the actual structure, you could do a little test debug cycle until you actually access the right properties that you're looking for. And I've already done that and messed around a little bit. And so another thing you could do preemptively is for any of these services, you could just type in like SQS documentation and or API gateway documentation, and you'll find stuff on the web that shows you like sample templates of what data looks like when it comes in. All right, so we want to update our thing. And so let's see how I have updated this. Now, because I recognize that there is an array called records, I say in event, look in the records array, and then for each array item or each element, basically I'm pulling out, I'm considering each array element as a record, and in there's a body property, and then I'm going to read from the body property to pull out the message. A lot of work to eventually get to sentiment and then viewing it. So I did all the hard work of basically parsing through that tree of what got sent in, and with that, we can just copy and paste all this. So basically, rather than doing one static thing, I gotta get, hold on a second here. Make sure I'm copying this right. Looks like I got a little extra information. Perfect. Oop, nope, nope, almost perfect. Copy, paste. Come back into here and try this again. Come over here, find some code. So this is just temporary code. And so here is an update to the functions, especially the handler function, going through an array of records and then pulling out the message in a body and then evaluating basically the message text again. So we deploy, and how are we going to test this? We need to create another test message. So let's go and give it a shot. All right, so send a message right here, the delicious message. Oh man, we're cooking with bacon now. We're on page 50 of 53. We're almost done, a mere 48 minutes later. All right, so we come back in and we need to find SQS again. And go to send and receive, give a fake message. Now, where do these messages usually come from? Usually you have some programming code that is generating this and talking to SQS and putting it in the queue. So we're doing it manually. So usually software puts things in the queue, and then everything, as you've seen visually, happens automatically after, well, it's all automatic at some point. Like imagine if you had a machine or social media messages generating things that are automatically populating your queue, and then your function automatically reads from the queue, and then your function directly writes to CloudWatch. Okay, so my message has been sent. I could poll, but I'm sure it's already been picked up. So let's go over to our function and see if we can find this in CloudWatch. So we go over to monitor. Here, I'm going to close some of those. Functions, view CloudWatch logs, log groups, look at our latest one, come down to log streams, click on the latest one, and let's see what happened now. So it looks like this is what passed in. So there must still be a console.log statement. And then I have another info statement that says positive. So how did those two things happen? Let me just go double check my code as a review to myself. So basically, a message gets passed in and we are sending it to a function which evaluates it. And where's my console.log statements? It must be in here somewhere. We have a console.log event in my handler. There we go. And we have a console.log sentiment. So I want to capture what was passed in from SQS, and then I want to, after I've evaluated the message, send out to CloudWatch what the sentiment was. So I could be doing something different than this. If this was something more robust, maybe I'd have a relational database or something where I'm tracking the numbers of positive and negative messages coming through. So obviously these things can get more complicated, but you see the chain here. You would come in via SQS, and then you would evaluate it, and then you could write out to some other database or service if you don't want it to go to, well, in addition to or as an alternative for CloudWatch. All right, that's about it. So let's see what we got. So this is recommending uh, sending in a bunch of extra messages. So here's the gross message. If I come over here, I can test that and verify that it works. Let's go do another one. And then here's the ambiguous message. You can test that one and verify that it works. So I'll go and check it in a minute, but let's see what else it says on here. It says go into your logs and watch for positive, negative, and NA. Sounds reasonable. It says you're done. Clean up. So we'll clean up in just a second. When we clean up, we're going to get rid of the log group. Then we're going to go to our SQS and delete that. We're going to delete our IAM role that was created, not manually, but when we first created the Lambda function, it was implicit, and then we do the Lambda function last of all. And then we're done. So let's go ahead and jump through a few last items. So first of all, let's go to monitor, CloudWatch logs, log groups, test, log stream. And if we're looking through here for the highlights of our console.log statements, we had a positive message, we had a negative message, and we had an NA message. And then we could even look at what the details of those were. So this is the NA message. There's what came in, there's how long it took to run, and then there's the sentiment analysis that it came back as non-applicable. Okay, so let's clean up. Let's go to log groups and we will actions, get rid of that. Goodbye. Let us go over to SQS and here's our queues. We will click on that. We will say delete and we will say confirm. Let us go into IAM and look under roles and we will type in evaluate and let's go ahead and I created more than one, so I will delete both of them. So we will delete those roles that were created exclusively for working with our Lambda function. And then let's go to Lambda and look at the list of functions. And I created two. So I'll do evaluate, or so I'll do actions, delete, and I will do confirm. And we are done. All right. So have a good day. Have a great week. Hopefully this is helpful to you in your career. And eventually I will find the stop button.